It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain, but once conceived, it haunted me day and night. Object, there was none. Passion, there was none. I loved the old man. He never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eye. He had the eye of a vulture, a pale blue with a film over it. Whenever it fell upon me, my blood ran cold. Cold, mad, murder. And so by degrees, I made up my mind to take the life of the old man and thus rid myself of the eye forever. Now this is the point. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation. I was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in a dark lantern, all closed, that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Ha! Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously, for the hinges creaked. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eye. And this I did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eye always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not the old man who vexed me, but his evil eye. And every morning when the day broke, I went boldly into the chamber and spoke courageously to him, calling him by name in a hearty tone and inquiring how he passed the night. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than mine did. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, my own sagacity. I could scarcely contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret deeds or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea, and perhaps he heard me, for he moved onto the bed suddenly as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His room was as black as pitch with the thick darkness. I knew that he could not see the opening of the door. I kept pushing on it steadily. I had my hand in and was about to open the lantern when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed crying out, "Who's there?" I kept quiet and still and said nothing. For a whole hour, I did not move a muscle. He was still sitting in the bed listening, just as I have done, night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently I heard a slight groan, and I knew it was a groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or grief, oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well. Many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept, it has welled up from my own bosom, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what the old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to fancy them causeless, but could not. Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found it all in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with his black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. I waited a long time. I resolved to open the lantern. At length, a simple dim ray, like the thread of a spider, fell full upon the vulture eye. It was open, wide, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the sense? Now I say there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, such as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of the old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I scarcely breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried to see how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew even louder. I say louder every moment. Do you mark well that I have told you that I am nervous? So I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer, I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder and louder. I thought the heart might burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw open the lantern and leapt into the room. He shrieked once only. And then, in an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. At length, it ceased. The old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eye would trouble me no more. If you still think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions I took for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out, no stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been way too wary for that. A tub had cut it all. When I'd made the end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark at midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as officers of the police. A shriek had been heard by a neighbor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been lodged at the police office, and they, the officers, had been deputed to search the premises. I smiled, for what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The shriek, I said, was my own in a dream. The old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. I took my visitors all over the house. I bade them search, and search well. I led them at length to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure and undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, I brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while I myself, in a wild audacity of my perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The officers were satisfied. My manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things. But ere long, I felt myself getting pale and wished them gone. My head ached, and I fancied a ringing in my ears, but still they sat and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the officers heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, about the noise steadily increasing. I rose and argued about trifles in a high key and with violent gesticulations, but the noise steadily increased. Why would they not be gone? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, but the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting, and it grated upon the boards. But the noise arose all over and continually increased. It grew louder and louder and louder. The men chatted pleasantly. They smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no. They heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. I felt that I must scream or die, and now again, hark, louder, 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 louder. Villains, dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here, here. It's the beating of his hideous heart.
It has many and many a hero going his kingdom by the sea. That a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other than to love and be loved by me. I was a child and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea. But we loved with a love that was more than love. I am my Annabel Lee, with a love that the angels coveted her and me.
And I swear I hit that button. So let me try that again. Hello and welcome everybody, as you get to see me bounce about. So welcome to our annual celebration of Poe, and a big thank you to Jeff Brown for his recorded version of The Telltale Heart. So we have a number of our favorite Poe pieces to share with you tonight, and we'll get through them and we'll talk a little bit in between. One of the big things we want to do is some Poe trivia. But first, I'm going to ask all of the company to just turn on their screens and wave at everybody so you see who's with us tonight. And there they are. So you'll get to meet each of them individually here in a few minutes, and we'll get our way through. So good. So everyone find your chat function. A few of you have found it, and I greatly appreciate you sharing. Okay. So your chat function is where you're going to share with us your answers to our trivia. And we're looking for 5 right answers, or whoever has the most points by the end of the evening if we don't get to 5. All right. So our first trivia question, where shall we go? How about, what university did Poe attend? Anyone in chat? No. He does get kicked out, or he leaves because he's impoverished. Anyone out there know the answer to what university did Poe attend? And where was it? Michael Hertzler has it. University of Virginia. So Michael, you've got your first point for the evening. Yay! Everybody thumbs up. Big applause. Welcome to our virtual sort of live, right? Okay, our first set of performances will be Annabel Lee with John Vickers Jones, Alone with Kathy Morrow, and Dreams with Laurie Wilson. Enjoy.
Annabel Lee. It was many and many a year ago, in a kingdom by the sea, that a maiden there lived whom you may know by the name of Annabel Lee. And this maiden she lived with no other thought than to love and be loved by me. I was a child, and she was a child in this kingdom by the sea, but we loved with a love that was more than love, I and my Annabel Lee, with a love that the winged seraphs of heaven coveted, her and me. And this was the reason that long ago in this kingdom by the sea, a wind blew out of a cloud, chilling my beautiful Annabel Lee, so that her high-born kinsman came and bore her away from me to shut her up in a sepulchre in this kingdom by the sea. The angels, not half so happy in heaven, went envying her and me. Yes, that was the reason, as all men know in this kingdom by the sea, that the wind came out of the cloud by night, chilling and killing my Annabel Lee. But our love, it was stronger by far than the love of those who were older than we, of many far wiser than we. And neither the angels in heaven above, nor the demons down under the sea can ever dissever my soul from the soul of the beautiful Annabel Lee. For the moon never beams without bringing me dreams of that beautiful Annabel Lee. And the stars never rise, but I feel the bright eyes of the beautiful Annabel Lee. And so, all the night tide, I lie down by the side of my darling, my life and my bride, in her sepulchre there by the sea, in her tomb by the sounding sea.
Alone. From childhood's hour I have not been as others were. I have not seen as others saw. I could not bring my passions from a common spring. From the same source I have not taken my sorrow. I could not awaken my heart to joy at the same tone. And all I loved alone. Then, in my childhood, in the dawn of a most stormy life, was drawn from every depth of good and ill the mystery which binds me still, from the torrent or the fountain, from the red cliff of the mountain, from the sun that round me rolled in its autumn tint of gold, from the lightning in the sky as it passed me flying by, from the thunder and the storm and the cloud that took the form, when the rest of heaven was blue, of a demon in my view.
Dreams. Oh, that my young life were a lasting dream, my spirit not awakening till the beam of an eternity should bring the morrow. Yes, though that long dream were of hopeless sorrow, 'twere better than the cold reality of waking life, to him whose heart must be, and hath been still upon the lovely earth, a chaos of deep passion from his birth. But should it be, that dream eternally continuing, as dreams have been to me in my young boyhood, should it thus be given, 'twere folly still to hope for higher heaven. For I have reveled when the sun was bright in the summer sky, in dreams of living light and loveliness, have left my very heart in climes of mine imagining, apart from mine own home, with beings that have been of mine own thought. What more could I have seen? 'Twas once, and only once, and the wild hour from my remembrance shall not pass. Some power or spell had bound me. 'Twas the chilly wind came o'er me in the night, and left behind its image on my spirit. Or the moon shone on my slumbers in her lofty noon too coldly, or the stars, howe'er it was, that dream was as that night wind, let it pass. I have been happy, though but in a dream. I have been happy, and I love the theme. Dreams, in their vivid coloring of life, as in that fleeting, shadowy, misty strife of semblance with reality which brings to the delirious eye more lovely things of paradise and love and all our own than young hope in his sunniest hour hath known.
And we're back to one of my favorite little guys, right? So what do you win if you win Poe trivia? Well, you can win a finger puppet Poe. All right. So that's one of your options. One of your options is a deck of cards and or Poe bandages. So here we go. Round 2. Are you ready? So for round 2 of trivia, let's see. What do I want to ask you? How about who was Poe's childhood hero? Anybody out there? Anybody out there? Get it in chat. As you see my big forehead, you can get to see all of those things. Oh, no one going to throw into chat? How about if I tell you it was a poet? Does that help? He idolized him. Anyone? It was Lord, oh, I got a few. If I give you a Lord, there we go. Jeff got it. Lord Byron. Very good. So 1 point there. And I'll mark that down. And we are going to move into Bruce Clow, Ariane Ryan, and Jim Sampson with El Dorado, Pit and the Pendulum, and Ulalume.
El Dorado. Gaily bedight, a gallant knight in sunshine and in shadow had journeyed long, singing a song in search of El Dorado. But he grew old, this knight so bold, and o'er his heart a shadow fell as he found no spot of ground that looked like El Dorado. And as his strength failed him at length, he met a pilgrim shadow. Shadow, said he, where can it be, this land of El Dorado? Over the mountains of the moon, down the valley of the shadow, ride, boldly ride, the shade replied, if you seek for El Dorado.
The Pit and the Pendulum. This passage describes the moment at which a man is sentenced to death. Later in the story, the man is tortured by a deadly, sharp pendulum that swings like the relentless arm of a giant clock, ever lower above his chest. The sentence, the dread sentence of death, was the last that reached my ears. I heard no more. Yet for a while I saw the lips of black-robed judges thin to grotesqueness, thin with the intensity of their firmness, of immovable resolution, of stern contempt of human torture. I saw the decrees of fate still issuing from those lips. I saw them writhe in a deadly locution. I saw them fashion the syllables of my name, and I shuddered. Then my vision fell upon 7 tall candles upon the table. At first they seemed white, slender angels who would save me. But from the angel forms became specters with heads of flame. And I saw that from there would be no help. And then the figures of the judges vanished, all swallowed up in a mad running descent. And then silence, and then stillness, and night were the universe.
Ullalum. The skies, they were ashen and sober. The leaves, they were crisped and sere. The leaves, they were withering and sere. It was night in the lonesome October of my most immemorial year. It was hard by the dim lake of Auber, in the misty mid-region of Weir. It was down by the dank tarn of Auber, in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Here, once through an alley titanic, of Cyprus I roamed with my soul, of Cyprus with Psyche, my soul. These were the days when my heart was volcanic as the scoriac rivers that roll, as the lavas that restlessly roll their sulfurous currents down Yannick in the ultimate climbs of the pole, that groan as they roll down Mount Yannick in the realms of the boreal pole. Our talk had been serious and sober, but our thoughts, they were palsied and sere. Our memories were treacherous and sere. For we knew not the month was October, and we marked not the night of the year. Ah, night of all nights in the year. We noted not the dim lake of Auber, though once we had journeyed down here. We remembered not the dank tarn of Auber, nor the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. And now, as the night was senescent, and star dials pointed to morn, as the star dials hinted of morn, at the end of our path a liquescent and nebulous luster was born, out of which a miraculous crescent arose with a duplicate horn, Astarte's bediamonded crescent, distinct with its duplicate horn. And I said, she is warmer than Dian, she rolls through an ether of sighs. She revels in a region of sighs. She has seen that the tears are not dry on these cheeks where the worm never dies, and has come past the stars of the lion to point us the path to the skies, to the Lethean peace of the skies. Come up in despite of the lion, to shine on us with her bright eyes, come up through the lair of the lion, with love in her luminous eyes. But Psyche, uplifting her finger, said, sadly, this star I mistrust. Her pallor I strangely mistrust. Oh, hasten, oh, let us not linger. Oh, fly, let us fly, for we must. In terror she spoke, letting sink her wings till they trailed in the dust. In agony, sobbed, letting sink her plumes till they trailed in the dust, till they sorrowfully trailed in the dust. I replied, this is nothing but dreaming. Let us on by this tremulous light. Let us bathe in this crystalline light, its Sibylic splendor beaming, with hope and in beauty tonight. See, it flickers up the sky through the night. Ah, we safely may trust to its gleaming, and be sure it will lead us aright. We safely may trust to a gleaming that cannot but guide us aright, since it flickers up to heaven through the night. Thus I pacified Psyche and kissed her, and tempted her out of her gloom, and conquered her scruples and gloom. And we passed to the end of the vista, but were stopped by the door of a tomb, by the door of a legended tomb. And I said, what is written, sweet sister, on the door of this legended tomb? She replied, Ullalum, Ullalum. 'Tis the vault of thy lost Ullalum. Then my heart, it grew ashen and sober, as the leaves that were crisped and sere, as the leaves that were withering and sere. And I cried, it was surely October, on this very night of last year that I journeyed down here, that I brought a dread burden down here, on this night of all nights in the year. Oh, what demon has tempted me here? Well, I know now this dim lake of Auber, this misty mid-region of Weir. Well, I know now this dank tarn of Auber in the ghoul-haunted woodland of Weir. Said we then, the two then, ah, can it have been that the woodlandish ghouls, the pitiful, the merciful ghouls, to bar up our way and to ban it from the secret that lies in these wolds, from the thing that lies hidden in these wolds, had drawn up the specter of a planet from the limbo of lunary souls, this sinfully scintillant planet, from the hell of the planetary souls?
Beautiful readings. Those are three of my personal favorites. And we're going to have another trivia question here. Some more Poe trivia for valuable prizes. Where was Poe found after his disappearance prior to his death? So chime in the chat if you want to take a guess. Let's be a little more specific. I think we're gonna go with AJ, the combination of the two answers. Oh, wait, I have a ruling from my judges.
No, company members aren't allowed
Oh,
to play.
okay. The boss says company members aren't allowed to play. I don't believe that was pointed out this evening to the company members, to be entirely fair. So anyone from who isn't reading tonight want to take a crack at it? And what if we don't get an answer, Cynthia?
Well, you'll give them the answer. And try another question.
Last call. Okay, we'll wrap that one up. The answer actually was outside a Baltimore pub house named Ryan's Tavern. So yeah, do we want to try one more while we're okay? We'll give one more shot. And the boss says panelists aren't allowed to. I don't know what you're showing to me. You're showing me a blank piece of paper. You're just throwing me, Cynthia. All right, let's see. Edgar Allan Poe published his first book at age 18. What was it called? And just chime in if you have our attendees. Michael Hertzler has it correct. Tamerlane and Other Poems. So Cynthia, are you keeping track of Cynthia is keeping track for the valuable prizes, and Michael has 2. Congratulations, sir. And let's get back to some of the readings. Coming up next, we're going to have To One in Paradise, read by Vanessa Peduzzi, then Imp of the Perverse by Joanne Smith, and The Sleeper, read by Judy Moss.
Thou wast that all to me, love, for which my soul did pine. A green isle in the sea, love, a fountain and a shrine, all wreathed with fairy flowers and fruits, and all the flowers were mine. Ah, dream too bright to last, ah, starry hope that didst arise, but to be overcast, a voice from out the future cries. On, but o'er the past, dim gulf my spirit hovering lies, mute, motionless, aghast. For alas, alas with me, the light of life is o'er. No more, no more, no more. Such language holds the solemn sea to the sands upon the shore. Shall bloom the thunder-blasted tree, or the stricken eagle soar. And all my days are trances, and all my nightly dreams are where thy gray eye glances, and where thy footstep gleams, and what ethereal dances, by what eternal streams.
It is impossible that any deed could have been wrought with a more thorough deliberation. For weeks, for months, I pondered upon the means of the murder. I rejected 1,000 schemes because their accomplishment involved a chance of detection. At length, in reading some French memoirs, I found an account of a nearly fatal illness brought about through the agency of a candle accidentally poisoned. The idea struck my fancy at once. I knew my victim's habit of reading in bed. I knew, too, that his apartment was narrow and ill-ventilated. But I need not vex you with impertinent details. I need not describe the easy artifices by which I substituted in his bedroom candlestand a wax light of my own making for the one which I there found. The next morning he was discovered dead in his bed, and the coroner's verdict was death by the visitation of God. Having inherited his estate, all went well with me for years. The idea of detection never once entered my brain. Of the remains of the fatal taper, I had myself carefully disposed. I had left no shadow of a clue by which it would be possible to convict or even suspect me of the crime. It is inconceivable how rich a sentiment of satisfaction arose in my bosom as I reflected upon my absolute security. For a very long period of time, I was accustomed to revel in this sentiment. It afforded me more real delight than all the mere worldly advantages accruing from my sin. But there arrived at length an epoch from which the pleasurable feeling grew by scarcely perceptible gradations into a haunting and harassing thought. It harassed because it haunted. I could scarcely get rid of it for an instant. It is quite a common thing to be thus annoyed with the ringing in our ears, or rather in our memories, of the burthen of some ordinary song or some unimpressive snatches from an opera. Nor will we be the less tormented if the song in itself is good, or the opera air meritorious. In this manner, at last, I would perpetually catch myself pondering upon my security and repeating in a low undertone the phrase, "I am safe." One day, while sauntering along the streets, I arrested myself in the act of murmuring, half aloud, these customary syllables. In a fit of petulance, I remodeled them thus: "I am safe. I am safe. Yes, if I be not fool enough to make open confession." No sooner had I spoken these words than I felt an icy chill creep to my heart. Now, my own casual self-suggestion that I might possibly be fool enough to confess the murder of which I had been guilty confronted me, as if the very ghost of him whom I had murdered, and beckoned me on to death. At first, I made an effort to shake off this nightmare of the soul. I walked vigorously, faster, still faster. At length, I ran. I felt a maddening desire to shriek aloud. Every succeeding wave of thought overwhelmed me with new terror, for, alas, I too well understood that to think in my situation was to be lost. I still quickened my pace. I bounded like a madman through the crowded thoroughfares. At length, the populace took the alarm and pursued me. I felt then the consummation of my fate. Could I have torn out my tongue, I would have done it, but a rough voice resounded in my ears. A rougher grasp seized me by the shoulder. I turned, I gasped for breath. For a moment, I experienced all the pangs of suffocation. I became blind and deaf and giddy. And then some invisible fiend struck me with his broad palm upon the back. The long imprisoned secret burst forth from my soul. It will be said, I am aware, that we persist in acts because we feel we should not persist in them. That single thought is enough. The impulse increases to a wish, the wish to a desire, the desire to an uncontrollable longing, and the longing to the deep regret and mortification of the speaker, and in defiance of all consequences, is indulged. And because our reason violently deters us from the brink, therefore do we the most impetuously approach it. There is no passion in nature so demoniacally impatient as that of him who shuddering upon the edge of a precipice, thus meditates a plunge. They say that I spoke with a distinct enunciation, but with marked emphasis and passionate hurry, as if in dread of interruption before concluding the brief but pregnant sentences that consigned me to the hangman and to hell. Having related all that was necessary for the fullest judicial conviction, I fell prostrate in a swoon. Examine these similar actions as we will, we shall find them resulting solely from the spirit of the perverse. We perpetuate them because we feel that we should not. Beyond or behind this, there is no intelligible principle. And we might indeed deem this perverseness a direct instigation of the archfiend, were it not occasionally known to operate in furtherance of good. But why shall I say more? Today, I wear these chains and I am here. Tomorrow, I shall be fetterless. But where?
The Sleeper. At midnight in the month of June, I stand beneath the mystic moon. An opiate vapor, dewy, dim, exhales from out her golden rim, and softly dripping drop by drop upon the quiet mountaintop, steals drowsily and musically into the universal valley. The rosemary nods upon the grave, the lily lolls upon the wave, wrapping the fog about its breast, the ruin molders into rest. Looking like Leap, see, the lake, a conscious slumber seems to take, and would not for the world awake. All beauty sleeps, and lo, where lies Irene with her destined eyes. Oh, lady bright, can it be right? This window open to the night? This wanton airs from the treetop laughingly through the lattice drop. The bodiless airs, a wizard rout, flit through the chamber, in and out, and wave the curtain canopy so fitfully, so fearfully. Above the cloud and fringed lid, neath where thy slumbering soul lies hid, that o'er the floor and down the wall, like ghosts and shadows, rise and fall. O lady dear, hast thou the fear? Why and what art thou dreaming here? Sure thou art come o'er far-off seas, a wonder to these garden trees. Strange is the pallor, strange is thy dress, strange above all the length of tress, and all this solemn stillness. The lady sleeps. Oh, may her sleep, which is enduring, be so deep. Heaven have her in its sacred keep. This chamber changed for one more holy, this bed for one more melancholy. I pray to God that she may lie forever with unopened eye, while the pale sheeted ghosts go by. My love, she sleeps. Oh, may her sleep, as it is lasting, so be deep. Soft may the worms about her creep. Far in the forest, dim and old, for her may some tall vault unfold. Some vault that oft hath flung its black and winged panels fluttering back, triumphant over the crested walls of her grand family funeral. Some sepulchre, remote, alone, against whose portals she hath thrown. In childhood, many an idle stone. Some tomb from out whose sounding door she'll never force an echo more. Thrilling to think, poor child of sin, it was the dead who groaned within.
Lovely. So our Facebook feed has finally caught up to us, and I get to welcome some good friends that are sitting out there on Facebook and tell us that we now have a tie sitting in our trivia contest. So Mr. Hernandez, Hector Hernandez, is there and had 2 correct answers. So Michael has 2, Hector has 2, Jeff has 1. Lisa wants to cheat, but she's a company member. So even though she's not performing tonight, she's not allowed to answer anyhow. So let's get to another trivia question. Where do I want to go? How about Poe theorized a scientific premise a good 80 years before this became a well-known and popular premise in the science world. Poe considered it his masterpiece. Can you name either or both the literature piece itself and the scientific premise? So somebody monitor Facebook for me. I think Elizabeth might be doing that while I'm here, and I'll monitor our chat on this end. Do we have an answer yet? Elizabeth, do we have an answer in Facebook?
Not yet.
Okay. So it's a scientific theory. Okay, now I'm going to give you a really big hint. There was a huge television show named this thing and a song by the Bare Naked Ladies. If I had $1 million. Anyone yet? It's the Big Bang Theory. And it was in Eureka, a prose poem. So I'm going to give you another one. Okay, we'll go a little easier. In 1845, Poe actually becomes a household name. He gets instant success with what famous poem? And today it's still one of his most famous. Michael has it here. Did we get an answer on Facebook?
No answer on Facebook.
They're in a delay, so we'll give them a few seconds here and we'll see what happens. But Michael, you are correct. We'll see if our answer comes in on Facebook as well. I just heard Elizabeth say no answer on Facebook. That's how big a delay we have between the live broadcast here sitting and on Facebook. All right, we'll pick up there in a second. We are going to move to the Cask of Amontillado, in which we are taking a look at a short poem that was actually put together for Poetry for Young People, and then followed by a monologue, and that would be Vanessa Peduzzi and Ariane Ryan. We're then going to take a look at The Lake and Elizabeth Bagley, so maybe at that point I'll monitor Facebook since she's going to be reading. And a new monologue for us that we haven't done yet with AJ Liana, who is joining us after probably a 20-year as his last performance. I think you were part of our 5th anniversary, and Tempest turns 25. This is our 25th season this year. And AJ was in the very, very first production. And that's AJ Liana with MS, or Manuscript Found in a Bottle. I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa and Ariane.
We continued in search of the Amontillado. We passed through low arches and, descending again, arrived at a deep crypt in which the foulness of the air caused our flambeau rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt, there appeared another, less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human bones, piled to the vault overhead in the fashion of the catacombs. Within the wall, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no especial use. the interval between two colossal supports of the roof and backed by one circumscribing wall of solid granite. He stepped unsteadily forward while I followed immediately at his heels. In an instant, he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had fettered him to the granite. "The Amontillado!" ejaculated my friend. There was a low, moaning cry from the depths of the recess, then a long and obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, and the third, and the fourth, and then I heard the furious vibrations on the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which I might hearken to sit upon it with more satisfaction. I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the kinkling subsided, I resumed my trowel and finished without interruption the fifth, the sixth, and the seventh tier. The wall was now nearly upon level with my breast. A succession of loud and shrill screams bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form seemed to thrust me violently back. For a moment I hesitated. I trembled. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed. I aided. I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamorer grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last and the 11th, and there remained but a single stone to be filled and plastered in. There came from out the niche a low laugh that erected the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of my own noble friend. A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it in the palazzo. Oh, dear life! Ah, yes, the Amontillado. Yes, the Amontillado. But is it not getting late? Will they not be awaiting us at the palazzo? Let us be gone. Yes, let us be gone. For the love of God, Montresor. Yes, for the love of God. But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient. I called out, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" No answer still. I thrust a torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in return only a jingling of bells. I forced the last stone into its position, and I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old rampart of bones. For half a century, no mortal has disturbed them. I drink to the buried that repose around us, and to your long life. In pace requisa.
In the spring of my youth it was my lot to haunt of the wide earth a spot, on which I could not love the less. So lovely was the loneliness of a wild lake with black rock bound and tall pines that towered around. But when the night had thrown her pall upon that spot, up as upon all, and the mystic wind went by murmuring in melody, then I would awake to the terror of that lone lake. Yet the terror was not fright, but a tremulous delight, a feeling not the jeweled mind could teach or bribe me to define, nor love, although the love were thine. Death was in that poisonous wave, and in its gulf a fitting wave for him who thence could solace bring to lone imagining, whose solitary soul could make an Eden of that dim lake.
I sailed in the year 1820. I went as passenger, having no other inducement than a kind of nervous restlessness which haunted me as a fiend. Our vessel was a beautiful ship of about 400 tons, copper fastened and freighted with cotton, wool, and oil. We got under way with a mere breath of wind, and for many days stood along the eastern coast without any other incitement to beguile the monotony of our course. One evening I observed a very singular, isolated cloud, and soon afterwards was attracted by the dusky red appearance of the moon and the peculiar character of the sea. However, the captain said he could perceive no indication of danger, and he ordered the sails to be furled and the anchor let go. No watch was set, and the crew stretched themselves deliberately upon deck. I went below, not without a full presentiment of evil. About midnight, I was startled by a loud humming noise, and before I could ascertain its meaning, I found the ship quivering to its core. In the next instant, a wilderness of foam hurled upon our beam ends and rushing over and fore and aft, swept the entire decks from stem to stern. The extreme fury of the blast proved, in a great measure, the salvation of the ship. Although completely waterlogged, she rose after a minute, heavily from the sea, and staggering a while beneath the immense pressure of the tempest, finally righted. By what miracle I escaped destruction, it is impossible to say. So terrific beyond the wildest imagination was the whirlpool of mountainous and foaming ocean within which we were engulfed. I soon discovered that the Swede and I were the sole survivors of the accident. All on deck, with the exception of ourselves, had been swept overboard. For 5 days and nights, the hulk flew at a rate defying computation, before rapidly succeeding flaws of wind which were still more terrific than any tempest we had before encountered. On the 5th day, the cold became extreme. The sun arose with a sickly yellow luster and clambered a very few degrees above the horizon. There were no clouds apparent, yet the wind was upon the increase and blew with a fitful and unsteady fury. We waited in vain for the arrival of the 6th day. That day to me has not arrived. To the Swede, never did arrive. Eternal night continued to envelop us all, unrelieved by the phosphoric sea. All around was horror and thick gloom and a black sweltering desert of ebony. Superstitious terror crept by degrees into our spirits, and our souls were wrapped in a silent wonder. The air grew stagnant and no sound disturbed the slumbers of the Kraken. We were at the bottom of one of these abysses when I became aware of a dull, sullen glare of red light stream down the sides of the vast chasm where we lay. Casting my eyes upward, I beheld a spectacle which froze the heat of my blood. At a terrific height directly above us, and upon the very verge of the precipitous descent, hovered a gigantic ship of perhaps 4,000 tons. Her huge hull was a deep dingy black. A single row of brass cannon produced from her open ports and dashed from their polished surfaces the fires of innumerable battle lanterns, which swung to and fro about her rigging. But what mainly inspired us with horror and astonishment was that she bore up under a press of sail in the very teeth of that supernatural sea and end of that ungovernable hurricane. For a moment of intense terror, she paused up the giddy pinnacle as if in contemplation of her own sublimity, then trembled and tottered and came down. At this instant, I knew not what sudden self-possession came over my spirit. Staggering as far as I could, I awaited fearlessly the ruin that was to overwhelm. Our own vessel was at length ceasing from her struggles and sinking with her head to the sea. The shock of the descending mass struck her, consequently, in that portion of her frame which was already underwater, and the inevitable result was to hurl me with irresistible violence upon the rigging of the stranger. A feeling for which I have no name has taken possession of my soul, a sensation which will admit of no analysis, and for which I fear futurity itself will offer me no key. It is long since I first rode the deck of this terrible ship, and the rays of my destiny are, I think, gathering to a focus. Incomprehensible men, wrapped up in meditations of a kind which I cannot divine, they pass me by unnoticed. Concealment is utter folly on my part, for the people will not see. It was just about now that I passed directly before the eyes of the mate. It was no long while ago that I ventured into the captain's own private cabin and took then the materials with which I write and have written. I shall from time to time continue this journal. It is true that I may not find an opportunity of transmitting it to the world, but I will not fail to make the endeavor. At the last moment, I will enclose the manuscript in a bottle and cast it within the sea. I have made many observations lately upon the structure of the vessel. Although well armed, she is not, I think, a ship of war. Her rigging, build, and general equipment all negative a supposition of this kind. What she is not, I can easily perceive. What she is, I fear is impossible to say. We are surely doomed to hover continually upon the brink of eternity without taking a final plunge into the abyss. From billows 1,000 times more stupendous than any I have ever seen, we glide away with the facility of a seagull, and the colossal waters rear their heads above us like the demons of the deep. But like demons confined to simple threads and forbidden to destroy. I am led to attribute these frequent escapes to the only natural cause which can account for such effort. I must suppose the ship to be within the influence of some strong current or impetuous undertow. The crew glide to and fro like the ghosts of buried centuries. Their eyes have an eager and uneasy meaning, and when their fingers fall athwart with my path in the wild glare of the battle lanterns, I feel as I have never felt before, that my very soul has become a ruin. Blackness of eternal light, chaos of foamless water, stupendous ramparts of ice, all towering away into the desolate sky and looking like the walls of the universe. It is evident that we are hurrying onwards to some exciting knowledge, some never to be imparted secret, whose attainment is destruction. The crew pace the deck with unquiet and tremulous step, but there is upon their countenances an expression more of the eagerness of hope than of the apathy of despair. The ship at times lifted bodily from out of the sea. Oh, horror upon horror! The ice opened suddenly to the right and to the left, and we are whirling dizzily in immense concentrated circles round and round the borders of a gigantic amphitheater, the summit of whose walls is lost in the darkness and the distance. But little time will be left for me to ponder upon my destiny. The circles rapidly grow small. We are plunging madly within the grasp of the whirlpool, and amid a roaring and bellowing and thundering of ocean and of tempest, the ship is quivering, oh God, and going down. We waited in vain for the arrival of the 6th day. That day to me has not arrived.
Oh, very nicely done. I'm just loving these readings. Wanted to mention, I've been showing the Tempest, the Poe finger puppet, he is also a refrigerator magnet. This normally decorates our fridge. And we also have Poe playing cards as a trivia gift, and Poe bandages, perfect for your. I'm being flagged down by our producer and director.
Our refrigerator one, though. We have new ones.
we would clarify you are not getting our personal refrigerator magnet finger puppet if you win trivia. So speaking of trivia, as we celebrate Tempest's 25th anniversary, let's have another trivia question. I believe we're now properly monitoring Facebook as well. Am I correct? Monitor person? Yes. Thumbs up. So, next trivia question. What famous contemporary author completed a Poe manuscript and titled it The Fabled Night House at Vina del Mar? So, famous contemporary author completed a Poe manuscript titling it Fabled Night at Vina del Mar. Feel free to chime in, audience in Zoom and Facebook lands.
Stephen King is a good guess, but that's not correct.
Good guess, but that one is not correct. We could certainly envision him doing that. Anything on Facebook?
Yeah.
No Facebook.
It's still behind.
So we do have a little bit of latency issues with Facebook, so we're catching up with that. And again, one of the valuable trivia prizes, Mr. Poe as a finger puppet, refrigerator magnet. Pretend I'm a refrigerator. It's stuck to it. Oh, go on and just take some guesses. Shot in the dark. Modern author. How long we gonna hold out there, boss? We're gonna wrap this one up. So the
The answer.
So Dean Koontz, also a very good guess. Dean from not too far away from us originally. He was born in Everett, Pennsylvania. But the answer is actually Joyce Carol Oates. So maybe not someone that you associate with the genre. What are you pointing to?
Give number 6.
Oh, okay. All right, so we'll try one more trivia question because, gosh darn it, you know you want a Poe finger puppet / refrigerator magnet, or Poe bandages, perfect for those Poe little cuts. See what I did there? Or the Poe laying cards. All right. Before I get the hook, time for another trivia question. We'll try this one. Contrary to his story, The Black Cat, Poe adored animals. What did he name his own black kitty? So what did Edgar Allan name his own black cat? Good guesses, but not so far. You took my answer, honey.
You have it.
I'll do it. Oh, anything coming in through Facebook?
Not yet. Next time, Jim's going to have to go in his own room, so you don't hear the two of us together.
Then you'll just hear us shouting from room to room at each other. And wonderful readings tonight, don't you? Wouldn't you agree? Well, anything in Facebook land?
Nope.
So contrary to his story, The Black Cat. Poe adored animals. What did he name his own black cat? Catalina. Catalina. So, all right. Well, let's get back to some readings here. And coming up next, we're going to hear Silence, read by Lori. We're going to hear Spirits of the Dead, done by Kathy, and A Dream Within a Dream by Elizabeth.
Silence, a fable. Listen to me, said the demon as he placed his hand upon my head. There is a spot upon this accursed earth which thou hast never yet beheld, and if by any chance thou hast beheld it, must have been in one of those vigorous dreams which come upon the brain of the sleeper who hath lain down to sleep among the forbidden sunbeams. The region of which I speak is a dreary region, and there is no quiet there, nor silence. It was night, and the rain fell, and falling, it was rain, but having fallen, it was blood. And I stood in the tall lilies, and the rain fell upon my head, and the lilies sighed one unto the other in the solemnity of their desolation. And all at once the moon arose through the thin ghastly mist, and was crimson in color. And mine eyes fell upon a huge gray rock which stood by the shore of the river. Upon its front were characters engraven in the stone, but I could not decipher them. As I turned to walk away, the moon shone with a fuller red, so I turned and looked again upon the rock and upon the characters, and the characters were desolation. And I looked upwards, and there stood a man upon the summit of the rock, and I hid myself among the water lilies that I might discover the actions of the man. And the man was tall and stately in form, and the outlines of his figure were indistinct, but his features were the features of a deity, for the mantle of the night and of the mist and of the moon and of the dew had left uncovered the features of his face, and his brow was lofty with thought, and his eye wild with care. And in the few furrows upon his cheek I read the fables of sorrow and weariness and disgust with mankind, and a longing after solitude. And I lay close within my covert, and observed the actions of the man. And the man trembled in the solitude, but the night waned, and he sat upon the rock. Then I cursed the elements with the curse of tumult, and a frightful tempest gathered in the heaven where before there had been no wind. And the heaven became livid with the violence of the tempest, and the rain beat upon the head of the man, and the floods of the river came down, and the river was tormented into foam, and the forest crumbled before the wind, and the thunder rolled, and the lightning fell, and the rock rocked to its foundation. And I lay close within my covert, and observed the actions of the man. And the man trembled in the solitude, but the night waned, and he sat upon the rock. Then I grew angry and cursed with the curse of silence, the river and the lilies and the wind and the forest and the heaven, and they became accursed and were still. And the moon ceased to totter up its pathway to heaven, and the thunder died away, and the lightning did not flash, and the clouds hung motionless, and the waters sunk to their level and remained, and the trees ceased to rock, and the water lilies sighed no more, and the murmur was heard no longer from among them, nor any shadow of sound throughout the vast, illimitable desert. And I looked upon the characters of the rock, and they were changed, and the characters were silence. And mine eyes fell upon the countenance of the man, and his countenance was wan with terror. And hurriedly he raised his head from his hand, and stood forth upon the rock and listened. But there was no voice throughout the vast, illimitable desert, and the characters upon the rock were silence. And the man shuddered and turned his face away and fled afar off in haste, so that I beheld him no more. And as the demon made an end of his story, he fell back within the cavity of the tomb and laughed. And I could not laugh with the demon, and he cursed me because I could not laugh. And the lynx, which dwelleth forever in the tomb, came out therefrom and lay down at the feet of the demon, and looked at him steadily in the face. Ours is a world of words, quiet we call silence. which is the nearest word of all.
Spirits of the dead. Thy soul shall find itself alone, mid dark thoughts of the gray tombstone, not one of all the crowd to pry into thine hour of secrecy. Be silent in that solitude, which is not loneliness, for then the spirits of the dead who stood in life before thee are again in death around thee, and their will shall overshadow thee. Be still. The night, though clear, shall frown, and the stars shall look not down from their high thrones in the heaven, with light like hope to mortals given, but their red orbs without beam to thy weariness shall seem as a burning and a fever which would cling to thee forever. Now our thoughts thou shalt not banish, now our visions ne'er to vanish. From thy spirit shall they pass no more, like dewdrop from the grass. The breeze, the breath of God is still, and the mist upon the hill shadowy, shadowy, yet unbroken, is a symbol and a token, how it hangs upon the trees, a mystery of mysteries.
Take this kiss upon the brow, and in parting from you now, thus let this much let me avow. You are not wrong who deem that my days have been a dream. Yet if hope has flown away in a night or in a day, in a vision or in none, is it therefore the less gone? All that we see or seem is a dream within a dream. I stand amidst the roar of a surf-tormented shore, and I hold within my hand grains of the yellow sand, how few, yet how they creep through the fingers to the deep. While I weep, oh God, can I not grasp them with a tighter clasp? Oh God, can I not save one from the piteous wave? Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream?
So, how are my attendees doing out there? You can type in chat, you can kind of wave at us, and we're going to go to another trivia. Here we go. So, let's do some easy ones, okay? Poe was considered a literary trailblazer and known for 4 very distinct things. So, as a literary trailblazer, he is the earliest writer of a couple of different genres. He is considered the father and the inventor of a certain type. And he was not the first in another genre, but definitely considered the trademark and set the template for other writers to follow, which would have been like Dean Koontz and Stephen King and things like that. So I've given you some hints. What do we got going? Detective story is one of them. Anyone know what the first modern detective story was that was Poe's? So Jeff has 2 points now. We're going to keep an eye on Facebook as well. Horror is definitely another one. He is the king of, and the first, right? He wasn't the very first, but considered that trademark. So there's that other answer. And Murder in the Rue Morgue is correct. Look at this. So we got 4 points going. I've got 2. I've got Rosebud with 1. We'll be paying attention here on Facebook. I'll check that here as well. And he's still a genre besides horror, another genre in there. Anyone have that one? And it is science fiction. He is considered the inventor of the genre of science fiction. And I think Michael might have hit 5 points. And let me see if anything's happening on Facebook. I know Lisa's been trying to put in answers. Everybody wants one of these. I love my Poe. I got this one at the Poe Museum. So this one will stay with us and we'll give you a brand new one. Okay. So Michael, we definitely have to talk afterwards and you can tell us what you want and we'll go from there. So up next is, let me look at where we are. Dreamland by Jim Sampson and Judy Moss with Mask of the Red Death. Then we'll be back for one more trivia section and our last two pieces. Take it away.
Dreamland. By a route obscure and lonely, haunted by ill angels only, where an eidolon named Night on a black throne reigns upright. I have reached these lands but newly from an ultimate dim Thule, from a wild, weird clime that lieth sublime, out of space, out of time. Bottomless vales and boundless floods and chasms and caves and titan woods, with forms that no man can discover for the tears that drip all over. Mountains toppling evermore into seas without a shore. Seas that restlessly aspire, surging unto skies of fire. Lakes that endlessly outspread their lone waters, lone and dead. Their still waters, still and chilly with the snows of the lolling lily. By the lakes that thus outspread their lone waters, lone and dead. Their sad waters, sad and chilly, with the snows of the lolling lily. By the mountains near the river, murmuring lowly, murmuring ever. By the gray woods, by the swamp where the toad and the newt encamp. By the dismal tarns and pools where dwell the ghouls. By each spot the most unholy, in each nook most melancholy, there the traveler meets, aghast, sheeted memories of the past, shrouded forms that start and sigh as they pass the wanderer by, white-robed forms of friends long given in agony to the earth and heaven. For the heart whose woes are legion, 'tis a peaceful, soothing region. For the spirit that walks in shadow, 'tis an El Dorado. But the traveler traveling through it may not, dare not openly view it. Never its mysteries are exposed to the weak human eye unclosed. So wills its king who hath forbid the uplifting of the fire-fringed lid. And thus the sad soul that here passes beholds it but through darkened glasses. By a route obscure and lonely, haunted by ill angels only, where an eidolon named Night on a black throne reigns upright. I have wandered home but newly from this ultimate dim Thule.
This tale may seem a little prescient. The Mask of the Red Death. No pestilence had ever been so fatal or so hideous. Blood was its avatar and its seal, the redness and the horror of blood. There were sharp pains and sudden dizziness, and then profuse bleeding at the pores with dissolution. The scarlet stains upon the body, and especially upon the face of the victim, were the pest band which shut him out from the aid and from the sympathy of his fellow men. The whole seizure, progress, and termination of the disease were incidents of half an hour. But at court, Prince Prospero was happy and dauntless and sagacious. When his dominions were half depopulated, he summoned to his presence 1,000 hale and light-hearted friends from among the knights and dames of his court, and with these retired to deep seclusion of one of his castellated abbeys. The external world could take care of itself. In the meantime, it was folly to grieve or to think. The prince had provided all the appliances of pleasure. There were buffoons, there were improvisatori, there were ballet dancers, there were musicians, there was beauty, there was wine. All the security were within. Without was the Red Death. Lo, 'tis a gala night within the lonesome latter years, an angel throng, bewinged, belight, in veils and drowned in tears, sit in a theater to see a play of hopes and fears, while the orchestra breathes fitfully the music of the spheres. It was toward the close of the 5th or 6th month of his seclusion, and while the pestilence raged most furiously abroad, that the Prince Prospero entertained his 1,000 friends at a masked ball in the most unusual magnificence. It was a voluptuous scene. Mimes in the form of God on high mutter and mumble low, and hither and thither fly mere puppets they who come and go. At bidding of vast formless things, the shift that scenery to and fro, flapping from out their condor wings, invisible woe. 7 rooms, an imperial suite. 7 rooms embrace visitors. Tall, Gothic, narrow windows, prevailing hues of purple, green, orange, blue, white, violet, and black. Scarlet panels, bloody tinted drapes. Against the western wall, a gigantic clock of ebony. Its pendulum swung to and fro with a dull, heavy, monotonous clang. And when the minute hand made the circuit of the face and the hour was to be stricken, there came from the brazen lungs of the clock a sound which was clear and loud and deep and exceedingly musical, but of so peculiar a note and emphasis that at each lapse of an hour, the musicians of the orchestra were constrained to pause momentarily in their performance to hearken the sound. And thus the waltzers perforced their evolutions, and there was a brief disconcert of the whole gay company. And while the chimes of the clock yet rang, it was observed that the giddiest grew pale, and the more aged and sedate passed their hands over their brows, as if confused reverie or meditation. But when the echoes had fully ceased, a light laughter once pervaded the assembly. The musicians looked at each other and smiled as if their own nervousness and folly, and made whispering vows, each to each other, that the next chiming of the clock should produce in them no similar emotion. And then, after the lapse of 60 minutes, there came yet another chiming of the clock. But in spite of these things, it was a gay and magnificent revel. That motley drama, oh, be sure, it shall not be forget, with its phantom chased forevermore by a crowd that sees it not, though a circle that ever returneth in to the self same spot, and much of madness and more of sin and horror the soul of the plot. There were much glare and glitter and piquancy and phantasm. There were arabesque figures with unsullied limbs and appointments. There were delirious fancies such as the madman fashions. There were much of the beautiful, much of the wanton, much of the bizarre. To and fro to the 7 chambers they stalked. In fact, a multitude of dreams. And these, the dreams, writhed in and out, taking about hue from the rooms and causing the wild music of the orchestra to seem as if the echo of their steps. And anon, there strikes the ebony clock, which stands in the hall of the velvet. And then for a moment, all is still and all is silent, save the voice of the clock. The dreams are stiff frozen as they stand, but the echoes of the chime din away. They have endured but an instant, and a light, half subdued laughter floats about them as they depart. And now again, the music swells, and the dreams live and writhe to and fro more merrily than ever. But see, amid the mimic root, a crawling shape intrude. a blood red thing that writhes from out the scenic solitude. It writhes with mortal pangs. The minds become its food, and seraphs sob at vermin fangs, in human gore imbued. And the revel went whirlingly on, until at length then commenced the sounding of midnight upon the clock. And then the music ceased, and the evolutions of the waltzers were quieted, and there was an uneasy cessation of all things as before. 12 strokes surrounded by the bell of the clock. Thus it happened, the presence of a masked figure. And the rumor of this new presence, a buzz or murmur expressive of disappropriation and surprise, then finally of terror, of horror, and of disgust. Who dares insult us with this blasphemous mockery? Seize him and unmask him, that we may know whom we have to hang at sunrise from the battle. A sharp cry, a dropped dagger, and there was acknowledged the presence of the Red Death. He had come like a thief in the night, and one by one dropped the revelers in blood-bedoubled halls of their revel, and died, each in the despairing posture of his fall. And the life of the ebony clock went out with that of the last of the gang. And the flames of the tripods expired, and the darkness and decay, and the Red Death held inimitable dominion over all. Out of the lights, out all, and over each quivering form, the curtain, a funeral pall. The curtain comes down with the rush of a storm, while the angels, all pallid and wan, uprising, unveiling, affirm that the play is the tragedy, man, and its hero, the conqueror worm.
Oh, what a wonderful, wonderful series of readings, wasn't it? We are happy to announce that we have a trivia winner. Michael Hertzler had 5 correct answers. So Michael, Cynthia will be reaching out to you through chat shortly. Actually, I see it's already happening. Wow, she's fast. We do have a few pieces left to wrap up the evening. We're going to hear Shadow read by Joanne Smith. And we will hear probably the signature piece of Poe, The Raven, read by Bruce. And something a little different after that, we'll see a video, Man in the Crowd, by the Van Dance Dance Company. That's part of their Swans and Ravens piece, part 3, if you're keeping track, Man in the Crowd. And then we will also have a closing message from Cynthia to close out the evening. So Shadow, then The Raven, then a little bit of dance and a closing message. Thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight. And congratulations again, Michael, for winning trivia.
The Shadow, a parable. The year had been a year of terror, and of feelings more intense than terror, for which there is no name upon the earth. For many prodigies and signs had taken place, and far and wide over sea and land, the black wings of the pestilence were spread abroad. To those nevertheless cunning in the stars, it was not unknown that the heavens wore an aspect of ill, and to me, among others, it was evident that now had arrived the alternation of that 794th year, when the peculiar spirit of the skies made itself manifest, not only in the physical orb of the earth, but in the souls, imaginations, and meditations of mankind. Within the walls of a noble hall we sat at night, a company of 7, and to our chamber there was no entrance, save by a lofty door of brass. And the door, being of rare workmanship, was fastened from within. Black draperies likewise in the gloomy room shut out from our view the moon, the lurid stars, and the peopleless streets. But the boding and the memory of evil, they would not be so excluded. There were things around us and about us of which I can render no distinct account, things material and spiritual, the heaviness in the atmosphere, a sense of suffocation, anxiety, and above all, that terrible state of existence when the senses are keenly living and awake. Meanwhile, the powers of thought lie dormant. A dead weight hung upon us. It hung upon our limbs, upon the household furniture, upon the goblets from which we drank. And all things were depressed, borne down thereby. All things, save only the flames of the 7 lamps which illumined our revel. Uprearing themselves in tall, slender lines of light, they thus remained burning, all pallid and motionless. And in the mirror which their luster formed upon the round table of ebony at which we sat, each of us beheld the pallor of his own countenance, and the unquiet glare in the downcast eyes of his companions. Yet we laughed and were merry in our proper way, which was hysterical, and sang the songs of Anacreon, which are madness, and drank deeply, although the purple wine reminded us of blood. For there was yet another tenant of our chamber. Dead, and at full length he lay, enshrouded. The genius and the demon of the scene. Alas, he bore no portion in our mirth, save that his countenance, distorted with the plague, and his eyes, in which death had but half extinguished the fire of the pestilence, seemed to take such interest in our merriment, as the dead may haply take in the merriment of those who are about to die. But although I felt that the eyes of the departed were upon me still, I forced myself not to perceive the bitterness of their expression, and gazing down steadily into the depths of the ebony mirror, sang with a loud and sonorous voice. But gradually my songs, they ceased, and their echoes, rolling afar off among the sable draperies of the chamber, became weak and undistinguishable, and so faded away. And lo, from among those sable draperies where the sounds of the song departed, there came forth a dark and undefined shadow, a shadow such as the moon when low in heaven might fashion from the figure of a man. But it was the shadow neither of man nor of God, nor of any familiar thing. And quivering a while among the draperies of the room, it at length rested in full view upon the surface of the door of brass. But the shadow was vague and formless and indefinite, and was the shadow neither of man nor of God nor of any familiar thing. And the shadow rested upon the brazen doorway and under the arch of the entablature of the door, and moved not, nor spoke any word, but there became stationary and remained. And the door whereupon the shadow rested was, if I remember aright, over against the feet of the young man enshrouded. But we, the 7 there assembled, having seen the shadow as it came out from among the draperies, dared not steadily behold it, but cast down our eyes and gazed continually into the depths of the mirror of ebony. And at length I, speaking some low words, demanded of the shadow its dwelling and its appellation. And the shadow answered, "I am Shadow." And then did we, the 7, start from our seats in horror and stand trembling and shuddering and aghast, for the tones in the voice of the shadow were not the tones of any one being, multitude of beings, varying in their cadences from syllable to syllable, fell duskly upon our ears in the well-remembered and familiar accents of many thousand departed friends. Ye who read are still among the living, but I who write shall have long since gone my way into the region of shadows. For indeed strange things shall happen, secret things to be known, and when seen there will be some to disbelieve and some to doubt, and yet a few who will find much to ponder upon. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow.
Thank you. The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, while I pondered, weak and weary, over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping, as of someone gently rapping at my chamber door. "'Tis some visitor," I muttered, tapping at my chamber door. Only this and nothing more. Distinctly I remember it was in the bleak December, and each separate dying ember wrought its ghost upon the floor. Eagerly I wished the morrow, vainly I sought to borrow from my books surcease of sorrow, sorrow for the lost Lenore, for the rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore, nameless here for evermore. And the silken, sad, uncertain rustling of each purple curtain thrilled me, filled me with fantastic terrors never felt before, so that now, to still the beating of my heart, I stood, repeating, "'Tis some visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door, some late visitor entreating entrance at my chamber door. This it is, and nothing more." Presently my soul grew stronger, hesitating then no longer. "Sir," said I, "or madam, truly your forgiveness I implore, but the fact is I was napping, and so gently you came rapping, and so faintly you came tapping at my chamber door, that I scarce was sure I heard you." Here I opened wide the door. Darkness there, and nothing more. Deep into that darkness peering, long I stood there wondering, fearing, doubting, dreaming dreams no mortal ever dared to dream before. But the silence was unbroken, and the stillness gave no token. And the only word there spoken was the whispered word, "Lenore?" This I whispered, and an echo murmured back the word, "Lenore?" Merely this, and nothing more. Back into the chamber turning, all my soul within me burning, soon again I heard a tapping somewhat louder than before. "Surely," said I, "surely that is something at my window lattice. Let me see then what thereat is, and this mystery explore. Let my heart be still a moment, and this mystery explore. 'Tis the wind and nothing more." Open here I flung the shutter, when with many a flirt and flutter in there stepped a stately raven of the saintly days of yore. Not the least obeisance made he, not a minute stopped or stayed he, but with mien of lord or lady perched above my chamber door, perched upon a bust of Pallas just above my chamber door.
perched and sat, and nothing more. Then this ebony bird beguiling my sad fancy into smiling by the grave and stern decorum of the countenance it wore. Though thy crest be shorn and shaven, thou, I said, art sure no craven, ghastly, grim, and ancient raven, wandering from the nightly shore. Tell me what thy lordly name is on the night's plutonium shore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Much I marveled this ungainly fowl to hear discourse so plainly, though its answer little beanie, little relevancy bore. For we cannot help agreeing that no living human being ever yet was blessed with seeing above his chamber door, bird or beast upon the sculptured bust, above his chamber door with such name as nevermore. But the raven, sitting lonely on the placid bust, spoke only that one word, as if his soul in that one word he did outpour. Nothing further than he uttered, not a feather than he fluttered, till I scarcely more than muttered, other friends have flown before. On the morrow he will leave me as my hopes have flown before. Then the bird said, nevermore. Startled at the stillness broken by reply so aptly spoken, doubtless, said I, what it utters is its only stock and store, caught from some unhappy master whom unmerciful disaster followed fast and followed faster till his songs one burden bore, till the dirges of his hope that melancholy burden bore of never, nevermore. But the raven still beguiling my sad fancy into smiling, straight I wheeled a cushioned seat in front of bird and bust and door. Then upon the velvet sinking, I betook myself to linking fancy unto fancy, thinking what this ominous bird of lore, what this grim, ungainly, ghastly, gaunt, and ominous bird of yore meant in croaking nevermore. This I sat engaged in guessing, but no syllable expressing to the fowl whose fiery eyes now burned into my bosom's core. This and more I sat divining, with my head at ease reclining on the cushion's velvet lining that the lamplight gloated o'er, but whose velvet lining with the lamplight gloating o'er she shall press, oh, evermore. Then methought the air grew denser, perfumed from an unseen censer, swung by seraphim whose footfalls tinkled on the tufted floor. Wretch, I cried, thy God hath lent me. By these angels he hath sent thee respite and nepenthe from thy memories of Lemore. Quaff this kind nepenthe, and forget this lost Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, whether tempter sent or whether tempest tossed thee here ashore, desolate yet all undaunted, on this desert land enchanted, on this home by horror haunted, tell me truly, I implore, is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Prophet, said I, thing of evil, prophet still, if bird or devil, by that heaven that bends above us, by that God we both adore, tell this soul with sorrow laden, if within the distant Aiden it shall clasp a sainted maiden, whom the angels name Lenore, clasp a rare and radiant maiden whom the angels named Lenore. Quoth the raven, nevermore. Be that word our sign in parting, bird or fiend, I shrieked, upstarting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Plutonian shore. Leave no black plume as a token of that lie thy soul has spoken. Leave my loneliness unbroken. Quit the bust above my door. Take thy beak from out my heart and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the pallid bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight o'er him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul, from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor, shall be lifted nevermore.
So Poe's Man of the Crowd, 1845, it was well said of a certain German book that it does not permit itself to be read. There are some secrets which do not permit themselves to be told. Men die nightly in their beds, wringing the hands of ghostly confessors and looking them piteously in the eyes. Die with despair of heart and convulsion of throat on account of the hideousness of mysteries which will not suffer themselves to be revealed. Now and then, alas, the conscience of a man takes up a burthen so heavy in horror that it can be thrown down only into the grave. And thus, the essence of all crime is undivulged. And that brings to an end our evening of Poe. So I'm going to ask all our actors to come on back in. We are going to stop broadcasting live. And going to stop our live stream.